Hello, everyone. Good evening from wherever you are joining us from. I'm online on two other devices, one on YouTube and one on Facebook, just to see who's joining us and interact with you all. Thank you for joining us for our, I believe, what is our third Creative Roundtable. I feel like this roundtable format is like my thing now. Whatever the topic is, I'll just do a roundtable discussion. Anyways, welcome everyone. My name is Cate Song. I'm the pastor of worship here at New Life Fellowship. And I'm here along with four other wonderful creatives at New Life. And I'm going to do an introduction shortly. I saw a comment on Facebook that you could not hear the audio. And so I'm really bummed about that. I hope that you can hear me. So please put in the comments. Actually, if you can't hear me, I can't even ask you to put anything in the comments. Anyways, I'm sure you'll make a comment if you can't hear it. But if, oh no, okay, I heard myself. So, all right. And so I'll be looking at the chat all night. If you have any comments, questions you want to ask our creatives tonight, feel free to put in the comments and we'll try to take some time in between to read those questions and respond to them. I want to welcome all of you once again, and this Creative Roundtable thing really was birthed in the pandemic last year. It feels like so dated now to say the pandemic. It's been 14 months, but we're still in it, people. Slowly climbing out, I hope, and we're seeing life at the end of the tunnel, or light at the end of the tunnel. And in the pandemic, I was just wondering, because I was just going through so many just different emotions and so many different just ups and downs as a creative myself, and I was wondering, what are other creatives doing during this time? Are they creating? Are they stuck? Are they feeling inspired? Are they not feeling inspired? And so it was kind of birthed out of that place, and then I just thought, let me just call a bunch of people that I know and see if they want to do this thing together with me. And that's how it kind of began, and it just kind of grew into a continual series. And I don't know how many more of these I'll do, but I know there are so many other creatives, and there's this kind of community building at New Life of the creatives within our midst of many different disciplines. And so I'm really excited to have another one tonight and to hear from our fellow creatives. I want to do a quick introduction. I hope that you're able to see all of us. There we go. Our first artist that I want to introduce is David Alternord, who is the main vocalist of the song that many of you just heard. And I like to just keep plugging that song because it's like our first original in a very, very long time at New Life. David is a singer-songwriter, really gifted vocalist, and you've heard him at New Life in many occasions if you've been attending, and he's been just writing a lot of songs, and it was so awesome to be able to collaborate with him on that song we recorded this past year. And yeah, I'm really excited to have him and just hear about his process as well. I want to also introduce Carolina Diaz-Chan, who is a violist, and you've probably also seen her play on many of our special services and our Sundays. She's a singer, and also if you have been attending any of our environmental green initiatives that Carolina and Calvin have had on Sundays, you probably are familiar with her. And I really truly believe that is also a very creative endeavor, because it's something that, you know, we have to kind of break away from things that we've done for a long period of time to try to create a new way to really thrive in this God-given earth that we are living in. And next I want to introduce John Caspido. And John actually is, you might not be familiar with him, but has been part of so many of our big projects that we've done this past year. He was one of the director of photographies that we've had in our Easter service and our Christmas service, and he was just such an integral part of putting that together, and he's so talented at what he does, and he's going to explain to you, because he's going to do that much better than me about what exactly it is that he does for a living. But truly creative, and we had actually his wife Gloria on our previous Creative Roundtable, so super excited to have you, John. And last but certainly not least, I want to introduce to you Taylor Bakari. Taylor is in our Next Gen ministry. She's in high school, and she's also a singer-songwriter. And I've known Taylor for a few years now, but didn't know that she was writing songs until recently. I heard one of her songs, and I just thought, how does she do this? Where is this coming from? I was so curious. And I know that she's continued to write in the pandemic. And so really excited to have you, and really like just want to call out and highlight the fact that I know people are going to be like, oh, a young person. Yes, you're a young person, but you're truly creative in your own right. And so really excited to have just people of all ages on this as well. And so, yeah, so with that, I'm going to, let's get started. I just have a slew of questions that we're going to go through, and our panelists today are going to just respond to them in their own experience. And so the first question is, how did you get connected to your creative side? So whether it be when you were growing up, or it's something that you started pursuing as an adult, how did you get connected? And the second part of this question is, where do you draw inspiration? And I wanted to ask that to Carolina first.
Thank you, Kate, and thank you for Thank you for hosting this roundtable today. So for me, I started actually in choir as a young child in church. And I did that in elementary school because growing up in South Carolina, that was, I guess, general music or choir was the only option for kids. And then when I got to, and I really enjoyed it. And then when I got to sixth grade was when you could actually choose another musical endeavor, as in band or strings. And I chose it because all my other friends were going to play violin. So I was like, oh, I'll just join this class. But it meant that I had to quit choir because I couldn't do both. And my family was very upset about that, but I decided to do it. They were like, you're just going to quit, this is going to be like a 1-year thing and you're making a mistake, but I didn't care. So, and then of course I loved it so much and eventually just pursued that. So I did it in middle school, and by the end of middle school, I decided that I wanted to take lessons. And then I auditioned for arts high school. And I went there, and it was there that I really realized that I could do this like as a profession. It had never really been told to me that like you could do music in college. So then I was like, oh, well, I'll just do that because, I've already devoted so much time and effort to viola. So I auditioned for colleges, and so I did my undergrad and grad in viola performance and music. I did undergrad in music education as well. But so that's kind of how I got into it. And as for where I draw my inspiration, I think that that's changed over the years, but I definitely grew up with a lot of pop music. So I didn't have a classical background until that music was presented to me as like, this is what you play. Wow. And that's kind of what I was trained in. But I definitely am more comfortable listening to pop music or rap music or whatever, current music of today. And in the past, since college, I've started to actually play different genres on viola and violin sometimes. So so I think that that's where I draw my inspiration from, like musical artists and current composers of today. So
Quick follow-up questions for you before you mute yourself. So I just wanted to, again, just clarify the difference between viola and violin, because this is a mystery for many people out there who aren't familiar. So can you explain the difference for us?
Yeah, sorry. So viola and violin to most people probably looks exactly the same because they're both on the shoulder. But actually viola and violin have one different string. So the viola and the cello, which is the one that people know probably most commonly out of the string instruments, like Yo-Yo Ma, who plays the cello, they have the same strings, but the cello is an octave lower. And the violin has the same strings as bass, like the string bass, but opposite direction. So while it looks like the violin, if you put them side to side, you could probably see there's about 3 to 3 inches difference on the bottom part. And it's also just bigger. So, yeah.
Very nice. Thank you. And my follow-up question to your other comment, which we didn't talk about last time, is who was your favorite pop artist growing up?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I feel like I had a lot. Like, I am the type of person that I get really obsessed with an album, and I'll listen to that album
Me too.
constantly
Me
and
too.
wear it out until I move on to the next one. And I do that with music that comes out this week, you know. So, um, growing up, I was really into Black Eyed Peas. That was one of my favorite bands. But lots of different stuff, just like everything. My mom really liked James Taylor, so we used to listen to that a lot together.
Nice.
Hootie and the Blowfish was
Oh my
something that she really liked. And they're from South Carolina, so my mom was really into that because they were from the same college. But yeah, so lots of different things.
Cool. Yeah, I'm always curious about what people listen to growing up. Taylor, I'm going to ask you the same question. How did you get connected to your creative side, and where do you draw inspiration from?
Yeah, so I think getting connected to my creative side was kind of like um, a gradual thing that happened as I just was growing up. I grew up in a really musical household. Like my mom, she went to school for the performing arts when she was younger, and she just has taken that with her and that music with her for her entire life. And just growing up, we would have a lot of music in the house. Like before church on Sundays, we'd be playing music and playing gospel music. And I don't know, I growing up, I just was there's always music playing in my mind and always music just playing in the background wherever I was. So I think that and like was a really big aspect to my interest in just music in general. And because I started hearing it and I definitely wanted to recreate it. And when I was younger, I had this Leap pad where it was like an iPad for children, I guess, and I would record myself singing like random tunes in my head
Oh,
on it. And I don't know, just looking back on it, it's really interesting to listen to. But
you still have it, the recordings?
yeah, I still have
That's
them.
amazing. Can I hear it next time?
Yeah, for sure. But so yeah, I just definitely hearing all that music in my life, I wanted to replicate it and I wanted to make some of my own. So I guess just growing up, I got really interested in music in general. So I started playing the cello, and um, I don't know if I was that good at it, but I definitely started playing, and that was kind of a gateway into um, me just discovering how I can like use instruments to create my own tunes and create my own music from personal experience. And for the second part of your question, I kind of draw inspiration from a lot of different things. Mostly like it used to be that it was mostly like personal experience that I drew inspiration for my music. Um, but now because of quarantine and because just life circumstances have changed a lot, I draw inspiration from like media I see a lot of the time, like movies and things I see on social media that just spark like a thought process. And usually when I feel myself like thinking about something deeply, I'll write it down. I'll turn it into a poem. I'll just do something with whatever that thought was, so that later I can go back and turn it into music and turn it into a song. So yeah, now like nowadays I start just trying to draw inspiration and like draw meaning from whatever it is that I'm experiencing, because like before I kind of took for granted the fact that I was always experiencing life, but now, at home, I think it kind of shifted a little bit. So
Hmm.
I'm kind of learning and working with trying to draw inspiration from media and things that I experience at home.
Yeah, thank you for that. John, first of all, can you explain to us what director of photography is for those of us who aren't aware, which I wasn't until very recently?
Sure. So yeah, director of photographer and or director of photography and cinematographer are kind of go together. You can use them interchangeably. So I'm a cinematographer, director of photography, and also a photographer. So my background is actually in still photography. But yeah, so a director of photography on set is in charge of everything visual, everything you see visually. So under the director of photography, there's the camera department, which is like, myself, and then I'll have assistant cameras or camera operators, and then also I'm in charge of the lighting and everything. So the electricians and the grips who are, turning on the lights, setting the lights, and then also shaping the lights. So yeah, all things camera and lighting, and yeah, that kind of falls under my realm.
And how did you get connected with that? How did you get into this field?
Well, so I first got connected to my creative side kind of later in life. I'll start with the photography side because that's where I started. But yeah, it was in college that I got my first camera. I went to college for entrepreneurship. So that's what I have my degree in. And I took a class, like a 2-week course overseas. And I was like, oh, I should probably get a camera and, take some pictures while I'm there. So that's when I got my first camera. And I quickly realized that I loved taking pictures. So yeah, my first trip overseas, I was like, oh, this is fun. So when I got back to school, I started looking for any reason I could find to like shoot around. So I shot some events for the student government. I shot some like athletic games and stuff like that. And then when I graduated college, I moved back home to upstate New York and had a job that could have turned into like a full-time sales career. And I was just like, I don't think I want to do that. I'm not going to love that.
No offense to the salespeople.
Of course. Yeah. Just not my thing. So thank you for that. Yeah. So in the back of my mind, I was always thinking like, well, what would I want to do? And it always came back to something with photography, whether it was full-time or just on the side. I didn't know if I wanted to do it like full-time yet, because it seemed like a big jump. But one day I heard an ad on the radio for a photo school, like a photo program in Massachusetts that wasn't too far away. That was a 10-month intensive program that got you in and out with a certificate of professional photography, whatever that means. But so I knew that sounded like enticing to me because I had already gone to a 4-year school. I didn't want to do too much more school for photo, especially because I wasn't sure if I wanted to pursue it full-time yet. But I felt something calling me like to go there. That was like my first kind of word from God, I think, to like pursue this as a career. So I looked into it, got in, applied, or got in, and it was at photo school that I realized like, oh, this is my thing. This is what I'm supposed to do. And I like really fell in love with it, really clicked. And that's where I learned like lighting and everything. It was a really, really good program. And they also focus on like the business side of it too, to like how to run your own business with photography. But then real quick, I'll tell you how I got into cinematography as well. So after photo school, I assisted for a while, and then I got an amazingly rare opportunity to be an in-house full-time photographer at an agency here in New York. And when they hired me, they asked if I was interested in shooting motion. And I was like, sure, yeah, why not? I'm not going to say no. So I definitely learned how to be a cinematographer on the job. So my photography background and schooling was like hugely beneficial, of course, because there's a lot of overlap, but there's also like, it's like a whole nother world as well, as far as like the technical aspect of it. But yeah, so I kind of learned cinematography on the job, but my photography background definitely has helped me as I've grown.
Yeah, it's so great to hear that like maybe you weren't connected to that growing up, but then you found this, like it kind of was revealed to you later on in life that
it really was.
Yeah,
which is cool. And that, yeah, I love looking back and seeing how clearly God has been like orchestrating my path in this career, because like I had like zero interest in anything creative growing up. I mean, I love music and, whatever, but I didn't like actively pursue anything creative.
Right.
So yeah, it's just interesting that this is how life has gone.
For sure.
Oh, and the inspiration question.
Yes.
That's a tough one. I mean, it kind of is ever changing, I guess. I mean, like it could be a thought, it could be something I see, it could be, yeah. I mean, I'm always looking at like what other photographers are doing or cinematographers, movies. I just recently got inspired to do a personal shoot based off of a Hollywood Reporter series that another photographer shot of John Oliver, and I just thought it was like a really cool idea. So I'm like, oh, that's inspired like an idea for a personal shoot I want to do in the near future. So like just, yeah, I kind of pull from everywhere, I guess.
Yeah. David, I want to come to you. Let us know how you got connected to your creative side. When did you first, start singing, writing, and where do you draw inspiration?
All right. So singing, my journey there, that starts in the shower, of course.
Love
Uh,
it. So on it.
but just like a lot of other people, definitely putting on a lot of concerts in the shower. Then one day my sister barged in, I think I was in like sixth grade or something like that. Said, "You don't sound half bad. You should keep doing that."
Really?
Yeah, so that's how I was like, I gotta grow. Like, actually, I got a growth spurt when I was like sixth grade. I've actually been this height since I've been like 12. I was 6 when I was 12, and then my voice instantly changed, and then that was the end of my growth spurt. So then, yeah, I started singing then in the shower, and then it became like nonstop from then till the end of high school. Um, Singing in the church choir, singing in a school choir. Later on in high school, I got a lot of what was it, vocal directors and trainers with that. And yeah, what was it? I also, fun fact, I did a lot of like competitions growing up too, or at least a few. There's a thing in my school, yeah, called Hills Idol. I'm gonna embarrass myself and say if you look up a song, what was it called? Dance with My Father Again by Luther Vandross, and then put my name in on.
Song.
Yeah, I sang that song. If you look my name up on YouTube and type in that song, you'll find that. I sang that one. I think that was when I was like 14. So there's like a lot of competition, singing and training, and exposure to just performing and singing in front of crowds at an early age. Yeah, and then from there, I would say in between that time, I was just always consuming a lot of music and art as well. My favorite genres are R&B. I think like singing YouTube videos and like artists and covers was just like probably like the top art I was like always consuming. It's probably what the direction I want to move in professionally myself, honestly. And I think that had a great influence, and that made me want to perform more, be a better vocalist, and eventually become a musician in general. And I started like really writing like late high school. I was like, okay, I can actually. People keep telling me I have a good ear. I can sing. I see apparently. So let's just give this a shot. So I've just been writing as an amateur here and there. A lot of half-finished songs and verses here and there. And that's how that goes. Yeah, and that's the story till now.
And where are you drawing inspiration nowadays?
Yeah, and inspiration. A couple places. I would say hip hop. Period. Hip hop culture. Hip hop culture.
Who are some of your favorite artists right now?
There's a lot. I'd say J. Cole, Lecrae. Yeah, I'd say J. Cole and Lecrae for now. And Miguel is probably my favorite R&B artist. Yeah, so those three. It's also say Japanese anime, cartoon, animations of the sort, anything like that. Avatar: The Last Airbender is a huge one for me. Also Naruto, my favorite one.
Wait, as in like you draw inspiration from watching those and then you write out of that?
Yes. Sometimes, or like the themes, like they have like a lot of subliminals in like animation. As you can see, I think Pixar has taught everyone in the past couple of years that cartoon isn't just for children, you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's very like mature themes. And there was one more. Yeah, it was just like hip hop, anime, um, and what was that? Actually, I guess that's it for now. Yeah.
Comes to you, you'll let us know.
Yeah.
I've never gotten into Japanese anime. I know it's a big thing for a lot of people. Taylor's like, yep.
Huge now. Yeah.
But yeah, I'm like slightly interested in it now because you guys are really like heartily agreeing with it. All right. The next question that I wanted to pose to you all is, what are some of the challenges you've encountered in your artistic discipline as you've been pursuing it? It can be, sometimes it goes well, sometimes things just don't go well. I can attest to that. So John, I wanted to come to you first with this question.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, I was thinking about this one, and I guess as a freelancer and also getting started later in life, I feel like the biggest challenge I had was always asking the question, like, what's next? Because I mean, I'm sure that's the case for like most careers, like what do I do next? But like, especially in creative careers, and I feel like now, especially freelancing, there is no like set career path or like ladder to climb like there is in, there could be in some corporate structures where, you start as an associate and work up to manager or supervisor or whatever. So there's no like set path. So I'm always, asking God and looking around and being like, okay, so where do I go next? What do I do next? And I mean, thankfully God has been super faithful in answering that question at each phase of my life. But along with that, kind of a peripheral challenge along with asking what's next is kind of looking around and seeing what other people are doing and comparing myself to others, which could be good in some cases. Like I said, I draw inspiration from looking at other people's work, but it's also obviously it could be detrimental, if you start to compare yourself and feel like you're not where you should be at this stage of life or whatever. But yeah, it's just always important to, Gloria has been a great reminder to like look back at where I've come from, and like years ago, like where I am now was my goal, like 5 years ago. So it's like, it's always important to take stock of where you're at and where you've come from, and use that as, as encouragement and like, you're on the right path, so, and whenever like a door opens up here or there, or like I get a word from God that like, this is where you're supposed to be, it's just, that keeps me going.
That's a great word, John. As you were sharing about that, kind of comparing yourself to others, I was thinking about like one of the hardest struggles for me as an artist has been not feeling like I've ever arrived. Like it just always felt like whatever I tried, it just felt like I never accomplished what I wanted to. And so it was this constant feeling of failure. Like, is it ever going to feel like I'm doing this right? And it's funny because yesterday I was listening to a podcast by an old friend of mine who's also an artist and somebody that I really respected back in the day as a singer-songwriter. I mean, I still respect him. And he produced my first album, and he actually shouted me out in the podcast episode, and he called me a go-getter. And I was like, that is not the word I would ever use to describe myself. Like, I thought what I was doing was kind of like in the shadows, like trying to like make my way in this crazy music industry. And the way that I was perceived as a go-getter, I was like, it's so interesting. Sometimes I think just it is important, John, like you were saying, just to like step back and then take stock, because sometimes I can get like lost in this world of like, I need to do more, I need to be more. Carolina, I wanted to come to you with this question as well. What are some of the challenges that you've encountered in your artistic discipline?
Yeah, so I relate to what John and what you shared, Kate, but especially for me, it was kind of the feeling of constantly feeling like you're behind. So like for me, when I decided to do viola, of course, I didn't really realize, you can't really know what's out there. I was just from South Carolina, and it's not really a very competitive state for strings. And it didn't hit me until I got to college, and then I came to New York, and I was like, wow, there's people that have been doing this like way earlier than me, like since they were 3 years old and doing competitions, and they, know a lot more music, and they're like a lot higher level, you get to college and it kind of like hits you in the face. And maybe some people that they realize that in high school, but it really hit me in college. And I just felt so behind, I was like, and I knew that I only had 4 years to pull it together, before whatever that graduation or whatever. In my mind, that's kind of how I thought of it in undergrad. And it was really intimidating for me to like meet other people. I always felt like, oh my gosh, I'm the worst violist in this whole school, or whatever, in my studio, because I would see other people play and I'm like, I'm just not there yet. So, yeah, it was like, it was a blessing because I needed that push. And luckily, like my private teacher, he was like, we're really close, and he was like almost like a father figure to me. Like he was very helpful, but also caring, because it was already really hard for me to like try to catch up in a way. But yeah, so I think that was one stage during college, and then coming to New York City was like another level of realizing that the pool is very big, and these are the best musicians in the world, and you have to really, bring everything. Otherwise, there's 20 other violists that they would be happy to call that are just as good as you. And so, yeah, and I realize like the importance now of networking and being like a full package. It's not just about your playing; it's about your personality and your timeliness and your professionalism. You know, so I recognize now like things that I have to bring, but it was definitely something that I struggled with a lot in college. So.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I can totally relate to that feeling of always feeling like I'm behind, because I feel like I blossomed late. I bloomed late as like an artist. I feel like even just recently I wasn't able to call myself an artist even, or a creative. And I'm like, yeah, I'm 40 now. But I still have goals. I still have goals for myself. Hey, David, how about you? What are some of the challenges that you've faced as you've been pursuing this, your music?
Yeah, two things like automatically come to mind. Definitely feelings of behindness. I would agree with that totally. And then the other one I would say is also like self-sabotage and worse habits, honestly. I think I get in my own way. A little bit when I was like younger, just in the sense that like I didn't have, and it wasn't a bad thing actually. I'll just say never focused. I was very much so a jack of all trades. So like good grades, played a lot of sports, was heavily involved in basketball up to the JV level. Could have went to varsity if I was focused in that area. And then I knew everyone knew I was talented, told me I was talented with singing and music. And I always thought it was good to like learn the instrument, but I never did that. Or like even when it came vocally in choir, they were like trying regularly. That was like halfway into high school. They were regularly trying to like, hey, learn to read music. Hey, do this and that. Wasn't doing it. And then after that, I'll say like being behind was more so like coming from like not having that focus in high school, and then discovering like I did want to focus on music, and then kind of being supported by like family and friends, but only really around like worship music and specific genres. It felt very limiting, because especially I love the worship music and I definitely wanted to reside in that area. But I felt going into college and then even now after the fact, it was like, okay, I feel like I'm getting supported, but it's only in certain music or certain genres or in certain areas. So yeah, there's like a feeling of a lack of support as well as being behind now. But yeah.
Yeah, wow. There's so much there. We'll come back to that. Woo, Taylor, how about you? What are some of the challenges that you've faced?
Yeah, I think that a lot of the challenges I'm still going through, but one of the biggest ones for me has always been my stage fright. Like I guess like growing up, I never really like I would see people on TV with stage fright that were like acting as if they had stage fright, and I'd be like, oh, that never happens to me. Like I can go on stage and like talk or do whatever. But I think like growing up, I started to like really recognize the fact that like all the symptoms that would happen for me when I would go on stage and try to perform, or especially when I would try to perform like originals in front of somebody, or just share like a piece of my work, which was like a piece of my heart with somebody, like face to face. That was always the hardest thing for me. So I think that really was just a huge obstacle for me in like my music career. I really was not trying to address that problem. I wasn't trying to like perform in front of anybody. I'd keep all my music to myself. But I think that like I kind of was forced to get over it a little bit because I joined a choir and they made me their soloist, which I really didn't think was gonna happen. So I don't know, if I knew that was gonna happen, I probably wouldn't have auditioned for it. But yeah, they made me their soloist and I had to perform in front of like hundreds of people. And I think just like performing that night really helped me to like realize that you know, I can do it. I can perform in front of people and be fine. And I felt pretty good that night, and I felt like I was on top of the world. I went back and listened to like the audio, and I sounded terrible, but I think that that night it was so good for me because I realized that like it's all in your head, and like you can really 100% do it if, you know, just forget about the people in the audience. And I came up with my methods and how I was going to do it. And
Good for you.
yeah, so like I think that kind of realization kind of happened like pretty recently, and or right before kind of quarantine happened and COVID-19. And so it's been kind of stressful knowing that, like, having that realization and then not being able to like act on it afterwards because of quarantine. But that was one of the hardest problems that like I had to overcome. But I'm working on it, so you know there's hope. But
That's great.
and I think like the second aspect of it is, again, I'm still going through this one, is trying to kind of like find my voice in my music. And because like I listen to a lot of artists that have really specific like voices, and they have really specific music styles no matter what genre that they work in. And I just have always kind of like envied that, because I feel like whenever I sing a song, I put on a different voice, I put on a different like music style, and that was just really frustrating for me because I felt like I was being a chameleon, and there was nothing that was like just really original for me. And I always hear like people saying like, oh, don't worry, just like sing from the heart and like your voice will come out. And then I'm like, every single time I do that, like it sounds differently. So I don't know what that's meant to mean. But so yeah, I think that just really frustrated me. And at this point, all I'm trying to do is just make music that that I connect with and that really comes from the heart for me. And through that, knowing that that's my message and the message is something that's close to my heart, I feel like that's what kind of makes me, I guess. And it's fine if I don't have like the most distinct voice, and you know that can come with training, that can come with like just growing up, or that doesn't have to be the case for me, and that's fine. And there are other ways to be make yourself an artist and make yourself like stand out from the crowd. So yeah, I think that was also a pretty big like emotional and mental thing that happened for me. Yeah, I'm working through it, trying my best.
Wow, I can so relate to so many things you just shared. You said something really profound that I wanted to just call out. You said something that you create felt like it's part of your soul, like part of who you are. And that's something that I've truly just, for years, I just struggled on and off and on and off with, more often than not, because I would write this kind of like this music, these songs, and I was so afraid that anybody would just say like, oh, I don't like it, or that they would like criticize it or give me some kind of feedback. I was just so afraid of feedback. I held on to these songs so tightly. And I think to my detriment, because I really forewent a lot of opportunities to collaborate with people or just to learn from others, because feedback, I think, is truly just important, able to kind of not allow these songs to like form my core self. Like my core self is who God has made me to be, and what I write is a product of that. It's not necessarily who I am. And so yeah, that's so, I just really truly connected with that. Let me pause for a second, because I just wanted to see if there are any comments or questions. Jess says, that is not later in life. I'm not sure exactly what she was referring to, but I feel like that could be a lot of things that we just said.
Yeah, I mean, so Taylor, what Taylor was just talking about really resonated with me of like finding your voice, because I'm kind of in a stage of my career where I'm trying to do that with my photography right now. Because yeah, I've felt like a chameleon the past couple of years, because a lot of I like that terminology that you used there, Taylor. A lot of my work the last few years has been for commercial clients, so like I'm getting hired to execute their vision. And I was talking about this a little bit last time, or like I get creative fulfillment out of that. It's like it's a challenge for me to come up with, you know, the best way to execute that vision. But yeah, as far as my own voice, I haven't really explored that since photo school, really. So like that's why I've been trying to do, this is the year of like more personal shoots and trying to figure out like what I want to say with photography and where I want to go with it. So like it's not my physical voice, but yeah, I could totally relate to everything you were just talking about, Taylor.
By the way, Taylor, both of your parents are watching online, and they're really. Your mom said that you sounded amazing that day, the day that you referred to as when you sounded horrible.
My dad started crying at that performance.
Oh my god!
It was just really funny. We like make fun of him for it all the time. But it was a very interesting performance for me.
That's really sweet. That's really, really sweet. Gloria says that's a word about never arriving as an artist. Yeah, I feel like a lot of artists feel that way. All right, let's move on. The next question that I wanted to pose to you all was how the pandemic has affected your creativity, your output, your line of work. It's been such a unique year in so many different ways. We don't need to go into all those ways right now, but especially for artists and creatives, this has been, I definitely have heard just different experiences across the board. And so I wanted to ask you guys about that. David, how has that affected you? How has the pandemic affected your creativity?
Yeah, I'd say it was very fluid. I think a lot of artists would probably relate to that. I think in some days, some weeks, some months, my creativity was at an all-time high, and then other days, weeks, or months, like you couldn't get me to move out of my bed due to the pandemic. So I would argue the overall gist though is that it definitely helped my creativity and jump started it. It kind of answered just our past questions too. Like in terms of challenges, I felt like I purposefully kind of quote unquote held myself back. And that was like by influence of family and parents. I did wanted to kind of fill my head up with knowledge and gain a better sense of my identity growing up. Because if I was ever going to be an artist or someone with platform, I didn't want to do that. So I held myself back a lot. But then, by the time of the pandemic, I graduated college. So I have a lot more time on my hands now again. So now it's like, okay, now it's time to really start putting effort into this thing I know I love and I'm also talented in to do. And then if it wasn't for the pandemic, I wouldn't have got into that writing camp that I told you about. So it was a praise and worship writing camp that was focused on justice and reconciliation over the summer, in which I began to write the song that we all know as Blessed Be for Through New Life. So it kind of just jump-started everything for me, truthfully. And I'm not going to stop. I'm going to try to take that momentum with that. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, it's been pretty up and down for me too. At points I'm like, feel so inspired. And then at other points I'm like, I don't have anything to say about this. Carolina, how about you? How's the pandemic affected you?
I'm unmuting now. Sorry. Selling Calvin. So yeah, I think that it definitely had a huge effect on me. It was like it forced me to reflect, basically, because when the pandemic hit in March, basically all of my gigs and opportunities for the year just were canceled. So I was like really in shock, basically. And at that time, I had kind of really been building up. I was starting to sub more and more for like orchestras. And I was taking a lot of auditions for orchestras like in New York City. So I'd kind of gotten into this like really, I felt like it was a really good routine of like every couple months I'd take an audition or I'd be playing somewhere, and then when the pandemic hit, it was like, wow, this is like a big change. Now I have no performances and nothing to practice for, basically. I had for the first time since I started playing viola, I had technically no reason to, besides, if I wanted to. And I actually think I was depressed for a while. So I actually didn't practice for like 4 months. I didn't open my viola case. And I was just like, why? I don't know. I really didn't want to, because I was angry. I was sad, so I think it was like a long time that I had to, remember and remind myself, why do I like playing the viola and why do I do music? Because I don't know what my career is going to look like in a year. So yeah, I think it was actually really good for me. I learned a lot, and yeah, it kind of had to be me telling myself that I want to practice now, that I want to do this. I don't know. At that time, I didn't know what was coming, but I was just like, this is music that I want to learn. Now that I don't have any music to learn specifically for a concert or audition. So it was actually really good for me. And now that things are starting to come back, and like Broadway's, everything's being scheduled again. It is nice to know, and I had a performance a couple weeks ago, and it's nice to be back performing. But I think like that reminder of just like remembering I need to play things that I want to play and motivate myself, not just by what's happening and what's being offered to me, but like what do I want to do. I think I'm going to try to really keep that mentality.
Yeah, I miss live shows so much. So much. One of my favorite bands did a live stream show last year. And it was like the first, concert that I watched in the pandemic. It was on my TV. I just streamed it. And I had tears flowing down my face because I just realized, oh my goodness, this is the case for most people who perform. It just were no opportunities to do so anymore, and this was the only outlet really for them. So interesting. Taylor, how about you? How has the pandemic affected your output and creativity?
Yeah. So I think I talked a little bit about this before, but I felt like I was making a lot of progress in my music and in my like self-expression right before the pandemic, and I felt like I was like, for example, like getting used to like performing in front of people and learning my methods for doing that. And then the pandemic happened, and kind of all that kind of just went away. Like um, I wasn't getting the opportunity to practice anything that I was learning. And so that was a huge bummer for me, because I feel like kind of as we're going towards the end of the pandemic, hopefully, I feel like all that stuff that I learned is kind of just like gone away, and I have to relearn it all, which is very stressful for me. Um, but and also during the pandemic, finding inspiration was a really hard thing for me, because beforehand I mostly just like found inspiration from things that I was experiencing in life. I think I talked about this earlier, but I wasn't experiencing anything from the day to day, like on the day to day. So I just it was hard for me to do that, and I had this expectation kind of like in my mind, or this like voice in my mind saying like, everybody's expecting you to make music, everybody's expecting you to like put more music out, especially after like I put out Moon, which is my first single for people who don't know. But I I thought there, like in my mind, I was just saying like, you've got to put out more music, you've got to like keep creating. And even when there's literally nothing going through my mind, like as far as inspiration went, um, I still was just like really hard on myself about producing music. And I think that was a really hard thing that I had to just go through during quarantine. And it was mostly just me. It was like mostly just um, my voice and my the voice in my head just saying like, oh, you gotta like do more stuff, and I just had really high expectations for myself that I couldn't meet at times, and that made it even harder to write more music, because I was feeling sad about the fact that I couldn't meet my own expectations.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was something that quarantine kind of just brought up in me, and yeah, working through that. But I think I did gain some from quarantine, like some good things. I was able to, after recognizing the fact that all those expectations were coming from myself, and nobody out there was saying like, Taylor, you gotta produce more music. Like that wasn't happening. It was just me. After realizing that, like I kind of was like, oh, I need to like take a deeper look at like who I am, and like what my expectations are for myself, like what I'm feeling just throughout all of this. And so I think it just being home and having all this time to myself has just allowed space for more introspection, and um, just learning more about myself. And because of that, I'm able to write music from more of like a more honest place, and really understanding who I am as a person, um, or better than I did before. So I think that was something that I gained from it.
Thanks for sharing that. So good. John, how about you? How did the pandemic affect you?
Um, A lot. I mean, like for everyone's saying there, I mean, there's so much to talk about, I feel like, from this past year.
Yeah.
And so I got laid off from my full-time shooting job in May of 2019. So like I began my freelance career halfway through 2019, and it was like the best start I could have asked for a freelance career. Like great opportunities, great work, really busy. And I was carrying this like really strong momentum into 2020, being like, yeah, my first full year being freelance, like super excited. And then obviously March came, and everyone was saying, like every opportunity just went away. And so for Gloria and I both being freelance, like our first thought was like, okay, how long can we survive on our savings without any work? Like we're just thinking like practically, like how long do we have to live like this? So that was definitely a struggle. And that was like the first few months really. And Gloria was sick in the beginning. So like she was like, out of commission for a couple months on and off. So as far as creativity, there was like zero output in the first few months of the pandemic. I like couldn't even think about anything creatively. But as things started to come back, like thank God, I'm very grateful that I have retouching, because I do like retouching as well for still photographs. So I did have some retouching work that like kind of helped us through. And then work started picking up a little bit in like July and August. But outside of work and, just creative output, like a couple of people have mentioned, it was definitely a time for like introspection, and especially because there was, more time to think. And then also just I had some, extenuating family circumstances that like really forced me to kind of dig deep into like who I am as a result of growing up in my family of origin. That really kind of got me in touch. I don't know. I've been working on like self-awareness really, and like being in touch with my emotions, and like the quarantine kind of forced me to do a little deep dive into that, which I think will be super beneficial in my just life and career as well, just because, being more in touch with my emotions will enable me to be more in touch with other people and connect with other people. And so much of what I do is working with other people, whether it's making portraits or, just being in close contact, building relationships. So I think that'll be invaluable moving forward. So like, that's definitely a good thing that came out of this year. And there's been other good things too, as far as, work stuff. And it's been a roller coaster. I mean, there's definitely a lot of negative things, but overall, looking back at 2020, like it'll be, I mean, for many reasons, it'll be a year, we never forget. And I think a lot of good will come out of it in my life and career. So.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I've really enjoyed seeing is how artists have shifted themselves in this time, during this time, and how like you're already creative and you're finding creative ways to kind of create again. And so that's been really, really just a joy for me to witness. There are a couple questions that have come through, so I wanted to pose these to you. As an older artist, Pat says, I struggle with technology. Have any of you had this difficulty adjusting to the ever-changing new technology? Well, Pat, I can share with you a little bit about that. I mean, I think I'm okay with tech, but when this pandemic thing happened, especially at New Life, we had to switch gears into, now we're doing church all online, right? We have to shift to an live stream only environment. And now, like, complete services, we were sometimes like recording in advance, and how to make this really feel like something people want to engage with and still feel present with. Because church life was so much about just being together physically. And so for me, it was like, because suddenly I had to shift from being like a worship pastor, just like leading worship every Sunday, to now I have to oversee these projects that I have no idea what I'm doing. I just constantly felt discombobulated. Like, I don't know what I'm doing with video. Like, and people are looking to me kind of like, oh, how are we going to translate this to video? And so for me, it's definitely been challenging. Yeah, anybody else have any responses to this question about technology and the pandemic?
Yeah, definitely. When things first started coming back, it was still like skeleton crews, and we had to figure out how to do all this remote viewing. And the first shoot I did was where I was remotely DPing a job for someone in Texas. So like I put together a gear list and shipped all this gear, and then like day one was me being on Zoom, walking him through how to like set up lights and like turn on the camera and run a microphone and all that stuff. It was definitely challenging. And then like the next shoot I was in person, but the director was remote. So there's just like the whole remote aspect of this job is crazy.
Yeah.
Definitely a struggle, but learning a lot.
For sure. Another comment from Jem is waiting for your album, David. Me too. T says me too. What Jenny's asking, what band did you watch on live stream, Kate? And it was Switchfoot. And Jem also wants to know, Taylor, where she can find your music. And so we can talk about that later. I'm actually going to go around with all of you and share where people can find your work. Jason wants to know from the songwriters, what comes first, the lyrics or the melody? Common question that I get, actually.
I could talk about this. Honestly, it's really different every single time for like every single song for me. Sometimes I'll be like walking down the street and I'll just be thinking, and like a lyric will come to me. I'll be like, oh, I gotta write this down. Or sometimes it'll be a melody and I'm like, I have no idea what kind of lyrics will go with this, but I still record it on my phone. So I think every single time it's something different. It just really depends on the day and what kind of mood I'm in. But yeah.
Me too. David, did you want to talk about that at all?
Yeah, sure. I would say for me, it's mostly lyrics.
Oh.
Yeah, I would say like I'll just like it would really literally either start with a word or a phrase or a stanza, and then I'd think of, does there a melody that makes sense to these words first? But yeah, it does vary. It does vary at the time. I'll just say it's lyrics more so for me. But I would say it was hypocritical to not say that it's not both, because in my phone there's like a bunch of voice notes of me just humming nothing, and so yeah, it can vary.
I can relate. All right, let's move on to the next question. And we're kind of getting into this latter part of this roundtable today. And since this is a New Life Fellowship Church discussion, I thought it's really important just to talk about what your experience is within your own artistic discipline in the church specifically. Whether or not you have experience, doing your art in church, but I mean, all of you have actually. So, so the question is, in your discipline, what have you experienced with regard to the arts in the church, and how has that affected your own artistic expression? Taylor, I'm going to come to you first about that.
Yeah, sure. So growing up, I think I talked a little bit about this earlier. My family were all very Christian. My parents and my mom specifically, her parents have like a church, and they sing a lot of gospel music there, and we play a lot of gospel music in the house on Sundays. And I think like Christianity and the church and music have intersected a lot in my life, or have overlapped a lot in my life. And growing up and coming to New Life specifically, I think they did a really good job of supporting when I said like I wanted to be more involved in music and I wanted to start performing. So I was really excited when I was given the opportunity to sing for the junior high band. And so, yeah, I think that was a really big moment in my music kind of story of my life. And I think that I learned a lot from singing Christian music at church. Like I learned a lot from like what messages in a song and what lyrics in a song can do for an audience. I learned that at church, and I learned a lot about performing in front of people in church. I learned that I was not good at it at church. And I think there's a lot of very big milestones that have happened in my music career or music story have happened at church. And I'm really thankful for that because it provided a really good and comfortable space for me to kind of grow and have my artistic expression change and just learn about music in general. So yeah, I think that a lot of really good things have happened at church as far as music.
I'm so glad you've had a good experience, especially at New Life. John, I wanted to come to you next, and I kind of have a general question for you because, and the question really is, what is your view as a cinematographer of like film in the church? And the big church, I don't necessarily mean at New Life.
Sure.
And then, how have you experienced your own, discipline personally? But the first question really is like, what is your view of it? And I ask this because a lot of like movies and shows I've seen about church like topics or like made by Christians, to me personally, have not been enjoyable. And truly no offense to people who enjoy them, but I personally don't find them really effective for my own, enjoyment of, film watching. And I feel like there's something missing there. There's a little bit of a gap. And so I was wondering if you could speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. And what I've kind of realized, I think, is that the church is definitely better, large church, is better at, I guess, telling stories that already exist, like documentary style or just like biblical stories, like you're like depicting biblical stories. But yeah, where I feel like it falls short is writing new stories or new, art, things that don't exist, coming up with new stories. And I don't know what the gap is. Part of me thinks maybe budget, like simply budget, like to, hire the right, actors and director, and, also like where is the screenplay coming from? Like who's writing the screenplay that, they're putting into a film? Like, yeah, I don't know what the gap is, but I definitely agree with that in that there's not many quote unquote Christian films that I could say are good cinema or like, but I will say, I think part of the problem too is like a lot of these films try too hard, like to evangelize rather than just making good art. They're less focused on making it good visually, good story wise. They're just trying to evangelize, which is great, but like just you got to think about the visuals too.
Such a good point.
Yeah, and I think I talked about Minari, which I think was an amazing film, and that was just Lee Isaac Chung telling the story he wanted to tell, which I guess is autobiographical a bit, right? But yeah, so that's just a story that came out beautifully. He, the cinematography was gorgeous, the acting was great, he directed it wonderfully. So like, that's like the difference is like it's coming from a place of just telling his story, and he did it beautifully. So I don't know.
Yeah. And in terms of your own, the creative side of you within the church context, how have you experienced that?
That's something that's new to me with New Life, honestly. And I mean, really, I haven't. I grew up in a Christian home, but like I never really got super involved in a church. Like, so finding New Life has been amazing for many reasons. One of them being that I have been able to share my crafts with the church, which is like a huge blessing. And it actually makes me think, so years ago I visited a friend's church who happened to have a guest speaker who had the spiritual gift of prophecy, and he came to me and he said, you love God and you love your work, and they're connected. And that's stuck with me, like, and it probably will forever. And I don't know what that means as far as like whether it means I'm like actually directly working for the church or like doing things with my craft for the church, or if it's just that like I am to be like God's witness in this industry that doesn't have many Christians in it working in it. So, but I think about that a lot. And I'm like super grateful and happy to be able to share with New Life. So that's been a huge blessing. I'm excited to see what that connection morphs into, whether it's me just being a good Christian witness on set to non-believers, or whether I do have more connection with the church in my work moving forward. So either way, it's good.
Thanks for that. Yeah, it's been such a gift for us to be able to work together this past year. But I wouldn't want to take you away from the other area either. It seems like they're just as important. Carolina, how about you? How have you experienced the arts in the church?
Yeah, so for me, like I shared before, like I grew up singing in choir in our church. So from an early age, that was something that I really enjoyed. And, growing up, I always felt like looking at the entire service of church, like obviously worship was my favorite, because that's when you actually got to do something actively for, as a kid. Obviously that's always the hardest part for kids, to sit still in a service, and singing and getting to stand up or like reading the music was always like my favorite part. And still to this day, it's something that I feel like is really good. And I think that since like I've been doing viola, it's definitely like been more recent that I have been doing viola in church and stuff specifically. But yeah, I still really enjoy that. Yeah.
That's great. And it's great to have you. David, how about you?
Yeah, for me, I would say like initially it was really good, because like as soon as I started singing from adolescence, like the church and school and like training was always there. I think it started feeling like a weight or a burden possibly once, like towards the end of high school, when I realized I'm like, I don't want to just make Christian worship music directly. And it's like, and I don't feel anyone or anything like pushing me in the other direction that I want to go in. So there's no one saying like, hey, like you can go to like a studio, like get a job and do this, and or or get in touch with producers and see what happens. I'll say it's bittersweet. It's definitely a bit of both. Like I've received a lot of encouragement. It definitely formed my taste in music. Growing up in Haitian church, French-speaking Baptist church, to be specific in terms of denomination, like a lot of gospel, a lot of hymnals, and it developed it helped me develop my voice. In church in general, especially in Black church, when you're found out that you have a talent, you kind of just get thrown on stage. So that happened to me at a very early age, and that definitely helped me get over stage fright very soon and stuff like that. So I'll give some and I'll take some. I'm grateful. Yeah.
I think one thing, and we've talked about this, I may have talked about this in a previous roundtable, but one thing that I really struggle with in the church as an artist is the compartmentalization that happens within the church sometimes when it comes to the arts. Like there's a very it feels like there's a very black and white treatment of the arts. Like this is Christian art and that is not Christian art. Like, and we love to use the word, now I'm saying we as in the Big C church, this word secular, like this is secular, this is Christian. And to me, that's not, it doesn't appeal to me, that kind of compartmentalization, because I feel like then we kind of put a box around who God is and how he moves and how he expresses himself through a lot of our artists in the church. And so a lot of my kind of journey in this area has been kind of pushing on that a little bit. Like, let's not try to make this such a such a defined thing, you know, that Christian art doesn't necessarily have to look a certain way, doesn't have to say certain things, and that God can move and breathe and create through all different kinds of arts, whatever it might look like inside and outside the church. And so it's a little hard, right? There's a little struggle there. I think there's a lot of maybe a belief in the church, maybe that, you know, certain things are acceptable in the church and not acceptable. Of course, you know, we can go into a rabbit trail about that, but I just wanted to include that. There is a comment coming through on Facebook where people are saying, I know this is in response to me saying that Christian films are bad, but people are saying The Chosen is very good. The Chosen is a game changer. That's what Tom said.
I will say, I've only seen the first episode or two, but I will say it's definitely one of the better Christian things I've seen.
I still have to check it out. I don't know why I'm delaying. I'm procrastinating, but I will check it out. I will. I've said it on record now.
Yeah, I need to watch it all too. Yeah.
I'm afraid of being disappointed. That's why I haven't watched it.
I think that's my thing. I think that's exactly my issue. But too many people are saying that it's good now, and so I need to check it out. Yeah. Guys, we're coming to a wrap here, and so my final question to you all, and I'll just kind of open this up to whoever wants to share, but what kind of art do you want to see in the church? This is kind of directly has to do with what I was just talking about. What do you visualize for yourself or for others? What kind of art would you like to see happen in the church? And anyone can just chime in whenever.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to see more things like Minari, like where a Christian artist is compelled to create something from, as we were talking about, their soul, and it like comes from, if it's coming from your soul and you're a Christian, like it's inevitably gonna like point to God, I think, or at least like spark conversation that could point to God. And so I just want to see more things like that where you create from the heart, and it's just good art, and it doesn't necessarily have to be in this Christian box of a Christian, you know, film or a Christian song, but it could just be something that everyone can enjoy and relate to and find beauty in.
Thanks for that, John. Anyone else?
Yeah, I'll answer. I think I would love to just see more risks taken on the side of artists, period. Musically, cinematography wise. I think, good art can't be created without being willing to offend or to surprise, shock, and or awe. And I think specifically musically speaking, I think as a church and as Christian people, and it's not all from a bad place because it is somewhat biblical, like we want to present our best selves. But at the same time, I wonder how much better and more real and relatable and or authentic would the music be if we're able to shed in a lyric or in a song or in whatever the not so pretty parts of our testimonies and lives and so forth. Right. I know some that might be too progressive for some, or maybe not enough, or depending on who you are. But I definitely would say risks is the way to go.
Thanks for that word.
That's a really good point. Sorry. Risk. I think that's what we were talking about, the gap before. I feel like a lot of Christian films are just too safe. Like it's all the same. They're telling the same story. They're telling the same, you know. So that's a really good point, David. I like risk. Risk is super imperative to making good art, because otherwise you're just making what everyone else has made before, and it's not anything new.
So true. Carolina, were you gonna jump in here?
Yeah, I was just going to say I agree with what everyone has been saying. And I think that if we can share specifically like some of the art that has come out of this year, you know, like I think that it's always some of the best art that comes out when you're dealing with like difficult situations or a big life change, or, you know, like a pandemic that is like anything unprecedented, or, you know, we know that it as art is like a part of our soul. It like affects us, and we create because of that. So I think that there's been so much art created this year that is really, really good. And I just hope that we can, share that and kind of express what 2021 was, or what 2020 to 21 was, and what that means for us in our life. So yeah.
Thank you. Taylor?
Yeah, kind of adding on to what David said, like kind of like having more vulnerability in a lot of the art that we see in the Christian world. I think that like one thing that a lot of like people in my generation or in younger generations experience when it comes to religion or Christianity is that they feel like they're not being represented in like the Christian world or in the church, and they feel as if there's no like vulnerability, like that people aren't going through the same problems. Everyone's like one with Christ, but like nobody's going or experiencing what they're experiencing. So it's harder to kind of like connect with religion or Christianity. So I think that seeing more vulnerability in the art and taking more risk in the art we produce or the art we see it's really important to connecting with my generation and the generations to come. So yeah, I totally agree with what David said.
That's a word. That is a word. Oh my goodness. I have so appreciated this conversation. Just really quickly, let's go around if you can share where people can find your work, how they can hear your music, how they can connect with you professionally. John, let's start with you.
Sure, yeah. My portfolio is on my website, so you could just go to johncaspido.com and see everything there, photos. I have a tab for my cinematography, and then trying to be more active on Instagram, but I've been saying that for years too. But my Instagram handle is just my name as well. Everything's just my name, John Caspido.
Okay, I'm gonna write that in the YouTube here. Taylor, how about you? Where can we find your music?
Pretty much most streaming platforms, like major streaming platforms like Spotify, SoundCloud, and iTunes. My name on my music handle or artist name is Astra, which is spelled Astre. And you can just look it up. It'll probably pop up. And my song is Moon. And I promise I'm gonna be putting out more music soon. I promise that.
I love that song, by the way, Taylor. Thanks for that. David, how about you? Where can people find your music?
Yeah, everything's up on the single that from New Life, that's on all platforms. And so look up either New Life NYC or my government name, David Alternord. You'll find that there. YouTube, you can do the same thing. And you'll see that childhood song from me from singing from 14 years old and the more recent stuff. And on Instagram, there's a couple clips of me, and there's going to be a lot of more music coming up in the next year. You can find me at the handle and the name David Tenor. So yeah.
David Tenor. All right, on Insta. And Carolina.
Yeah, so I came up with a new website this year. So it's just carolinadiazchan.com. So that has everything about me and some videos of my playing that you could look at. But if you're looking for just to like contact me, I guess you could also do that through my website, or you could do it on Instagram. I'm pretty active on Instagram, so it's just at Carolina Diaz-Chan.
Awesome. Thank you all. I just want to thank everybody who has joined us tonight on YouTube and on Facebook. Thank you for your comments, your questions, just interacting with us. I know many of you are creatives yourselves, and so really, really appreciate just tuning in and hearing what our artists have to say tonight. I want to thank each of you, John, Carolina, Taylor, David, for being with us and for sharing your life and your story and your art with us. It's just been so fulfilling for me to be able to hear from you. And so I'm going to close with a short prayer, and then I'll just let everyone go. Father, thank you so much for this evening. I am just so grateful, Lord, for the creatives in our church community who have so much to share, so much to give, so much to contribute. And for sure, Lord God, this past year has been a difficult and challenging one, but you've still shown yourself strong. You've still stayed faithful, Lord God, through this past year, and you've sustained us. And so I just am looking forward to just new energy and new creativity, just new songs, new films, new just things that are happening in our midst that are cropping up, that there will be much fruit, Lord, that comes out of this period. And so I just want to bless these artists tonight and everybody who is watching. And Lord, continue to unite us as one voice, one family in you. We pray all these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. I'm going to end the stream now. All right, take care.
Thank you.